Where there's thunder, there's lightning. John Nada. Wanted to touch on a subject today, and the subject being that of mindfulness. And to start out, to kick it off, I want to just make mention that I saw your video, Simon, the first video that you did, and I'd like to say that it was well done, and I was a little disappointed to hear that you're not going to be making any videos until the beginning of the year, but I'm looking forward to hearing all those stories that you alluded to as far as your work and everything else. I'm kind of in the same position. I've got a lot of stories and things that I wish I could tell, but at this point in time wouldn't be good for business, so to speak. But I bring up your video because in it, Simon makes a good point, and if you don't know who I'm talking about, Simon Diamond Mgtow is the channel. Check it out. But Simon brought up a good point, which is something that I have kind of flirted with here and there on the program in terms of what I really think Mgtow is really about. Because aside from all the buzzwords and the science and the culture aspects that we hear about on most of the channels, I mean, that was started with Barbarossa and Stardust and all the groundwork for Mgtow that was laid by those guys and others. I think that with some of the channels and with some of the content contributors, and even some of those that you know, the articles that are written on the Mgtow forum, but also Mgtow Reddit, which I wanted to point out that a couple weeks ago I noticed one of my videos, it was the one on prostitution versus dating, was linked to the Mgtow Reddit forum, and I was happy to see that because I'm an avid reader of the Mgtow Reddit forum. But what I'm trying to get at here is, Simon brought up in his video that aside from hypergamy, gynocentrism, the really bad laws, marriage laws and divorce laws and things like that are stacked against us, the next step, and I talked about it in a previous video about the last stage of Mgtow, the next step in all this is self-actualization, self-realization, self-improvement, whatever you want to call it. And Simon brought that up, and really, honestly, I think that that's what lies at the heart of Mgtow. You know, minus what we have all come to realize and come to see as a result of the culture we live in and the laws that exist. As I've been hearing a lot lately on many content channels and from many content producers, that Mgtow, you know, it has been bandied about as a movement because everything has to be a movement now. Everything is a movement. This is a movement. That's a movement. A bowel movement. This, that, and the other. But the reality of it is that people, they don't understand the concept of doing your own thing without it having to be announced and marched for and everything else. And that's why Mgtow is so strange to people, and so they infer that it's a movement you know, of people in the way that like the MRA is a movement. They don't realize that Mgtow just is. It's like the Tao. To speak the Tao is for it to no longer be the Tao. The Tao just is. It's the energy in the background of everything, you know, and it's in everything and permeates everything. Well, in the same way, that's what Mgtow is. Mgtow really could be anything because it's all up to the interpretation of the individual. What is going my own way for me is not the same as what is going my own way for somebody else. And so really Mgtow is up to the practitioner, so to speak. So, but what I think it ultimately comes back to, and what it ultimately ends up being embodied as, is self-actualization. Because it's ultimately about finding out who you really are and what it is that you really want out of life. Now, again, that's going to look different for every person, but I believe that that's really what the fundamental truth in Mgtow is. Sure, it's nice to get red-pilled. It's nice to understand female nature and female behavior and human behavior in general. But the interesting thing is, now that I understand how all this works, and here's the other myth that I think I was reading the other day, where somebody was making the accusation that the majority of people that are Mgtow are not people that have gone through divorces or experienced all these really bad relationship situations, but that they were just simply guys that couldn't get women anyway. And I've said it on the program before, as well as many others have, that this couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, the more that I understand and the more red-pilled I am, the more, the easier that it has been to be in a situation and position to have a long-term relationship, or even just a friends with benefits situation. The other day, I was basically propositioned by somebody that I used to work with basically a no strings attached type situation from them. So it's a myth to say that, we're guys that just couldn't get dates, and so therefore we went Mgtow. Now, there are certainly those people that are like that, but it's just the normal default position, the natural default position in a world, as just as against us in the sense that it is. And so it's just where we fall. And going back to that other point, it's just that most Mgtow men have figured out that it's not worth the hassle. The juice isn't worth the squeeze. And so because of that, we've broke on through to the other side, so to speak, and realized that life is more than the sum of how many people you've slept with. And so it's because of that fact that we see the futility in relationships, long-term relationships. There's still Mgtow out there that date, and still Mgtow out there that, are sexually active and all of that. But I think that the more that you're in it, and the more that you move through your life, the more you realize the tremendous amount of waste of time that it really is, and that it's not a fulfilling thing, in the way that society has basically, painted it. Because basically from the moment that you're able to understand human, male-female dynamics, it's painted to you that you can never be happy unless you have a relationship, or you're sexually active, or you have all these things that society says that you should be and do. And so again, it goes back to that self-actualization. We talk about mindfulness, or we have talked about mindfulness in the past. And essentially, everybody has their own definition of what that is, but it's essentially living as things, living within the moment, so to speak, or within a particular span of time, with no expectations of the past or the future, but rather just seeing things for how they are, and taking stock of things. It's a self-reflection kind of thing, introspection kind of thing. And so basically, the other thing is, there was this concept in the martial arts, when I was active in the martial arts, of Mu Shin, or no mind. Because sometimes you can have too many mind. You're thinking of what tomorrow brings, or what the past has brought. And so you can't take genuine stock of what's going on in your life and figure out the next path that you need to go down, or the next trail that you need to cut down. And so I think that's, Simon brought up a valid point of that. That, it's good to talk about all these things, gynocentrism, hypergamy, all that stuff. But I see, like I said, I see a moving away from, because you've got all your content contributors, and they all have their different things that they kind of specialize in. And so I feel like you've got the guys that kind of focus a lot on the science of human nature and female nature and the biology of it and everything else. And that's all great and wonderful, and definitely brings a lot of insight into why things are the way they are. And then you have the more politically minded guys that, they talk a lot about the female, what's going on with the society politically and culturally. If you listen to TFM very much lately, much of his show has become about these articles where how feminism is infecting and causing all these changes culturally and politically. But then I feel like too, you also have the Mgtow that are still they're still in the angry phase, and so it's basically they're still upset about a lot of the things and the aspects of what's happened to them and what's going on in society, and it's good introductory material. But what I've noticed too is you have a lot more of the philosophical side of things. With Paul Proteus is one of the guys that he hasn't put out a video in a while, but when he does, it's one of those things where there's something profound in at least every one of them. And I'm actually kind of, I don't know the man personally, but I'm actually kind of, I see it as a good thing. The less and less content that somebody produces and puts out, to me, suggests that the more they're going on and living their life and actually going their own way. And so it's actually a good thing. As much as I love the community and get a lot out of the content and everything else. But I think that that's ultimately, at least for me, because I'm not going to try to say that everybody necessarily sees it the way I do or should go this route. But for me, what it has done is it has shown me it's kind of like when we used to think that, that the universe was all that there was, our galaxy was all that there was, our planets were all that existed. And then, after several years or so, the telescopes and the technology and everything started to get a lot better. And we realized that there were all these other galaxies out here, galaxies upon galaxies, and all these other stars that had their own, in a lot of cases, their own planets that revolved around them. And so there were all these other systems out there. And then, in recent years, the realization that there may even be multiple dimensions and multiple universes different from our own. And that is kind of what I think the Mgtow realization has been for me, is that you were kind of told this story of, boy meets girl and you get married and everything. There was always something about that. Sure, there was a lot of comfort in that, but there was always something about that seemed like you were being held back, and that, the best you could hope for was this mundane life with the wife and the kids and everything else. And that's kind of what Mgtow has done for me. I think initially for a lot of people it's a depressing realization. And I certainly know people that I've talked to about it before, they are depressed about it. They are upset that that's the way that things really are. But then you realize how many doors and opportunities that Mgtow opens up for you. You realize that you could go in whatever direction you want to go in. That you've got all this opportunity that you didn't have before, and that you don't have to be beholden to anybody. And so then you begin to realize the vastness. We're told how mysterious women are. We're told, it's almost like, you're set up to try to figure them out and all this. And, it's this reality that it's like, nothing's more vast than trying to figure yourself out. Nothing's more awe-inspiring and worthwhile than trying to figure out who you are and where you fit in. So that's something I want to encourage amongst Mgtow and just in the community in general. Keep reflecting. Keep trying to find out what it is you want in life and who you truly are. Because this is really what the great mystery is. And there's a lot that can be done and said with all of that. As always, remember, you're free to do as you're told. This has been John Nada in the Days of Thunder.